Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on navigating grief through the holidays. Most, if not all of us, have experienced the loss of a loved one, or maybe we know someone that has lost a loved one. Grief on its own is difficult, but it can be an even greater challenge during the holidays. The aim of today's webinar is to acknowledge this particular challenge. A few housekeeping items before I introduce you to our speaker for today. If you have any questions throughout our time, please put them in the Q&A, not the regular chat, and Greg will address these towards the end of our presentation. And now to our presenter. Some of you may remember Greg from our grief series a few years ago, so we are grateful to have him back. Greg is an LPC in the state of Missouri. He received his Master's of Arts in Counseling in 2005 from Covenant Theological Seminary, where he also obtained a Master's in General Theological Studies in 1999. In 2016, Greg was awarded a Death and Grief Studies certificate from Alan Wolfelt's Loss and Life Transition Center. Greg's focus has been in the area of grief and loss counseling as a result of his close personal experience with sudden tragic death. He has been a leader of grief groups, a speaker at numerous grief seminars, and a workshop presenter at a National Bereaved Parents Conference. He has spearheaded the formation of the Hope Center for Grief and Life Losses, a division of Kaleo Counseling Services, and has been training counselors in Wolfelt's companioning model. The Hope Center and Kaleo have offices in both Cottleville and the Webster Groves area. Greg also provides one-on-one counseling for those seeking a path toward integrating the pain of loss into their life. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Michaela. So appreciate being here. I want to thank right up front. Let me thank Brand Asset Management Group for your guys' contribution to community on such a difficult matter. And it is difficult. It has a special place for me as well. You touched a lot on the idea of who am I and what am I professionally. But I think probably as important, and to be honest with you, maybe even more important in the context of what we're doing today. I think it's important for you to know your presenter. I learned that actually when I was in seminary. One of the professors says, when you see something or you're listening to something, know who that person is and why they're doing what they do. And so I wanted to just kind of add that part in. Why do I do what I do? Why do I come and do these kinds of things? Because in 1998, actually September 1st, 1998, my son Jeremy died. He was 17 years old. It was a single car crash. And so that was my first actually experience with intense, severe death loss. At that point in my life, I really did not get a lot of good care. So I became all this professional stuff, LPC, licensed professional counselor, things like that, because I wanted to be part of the solution, not a part of the problem. Because in the midst of all that, I eventually did find some really good care. And so I wanted to be able to do that for others. In addition to that, I also, not too long after Jeremy died, I went through a divorce. And a divorce, believe it or not, is a loss as well. There's two kinds of losses. There's death losses and there's life losses. And so I've kind of experienced both. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm basically going to present from a way of focusing in more on the death loss. But if you're here today because of a life loss or so many of these things that I'm going to kind of make you aware of today are going to be pertinent. Because I remember when I went through the divorce, it was like, wow, this is a whole lot like, the grief I had when my son died. And to be honest with you, sometimes it was harder even. But that's a different seminar for a different time. So we're just kind of going to roll into this whole idea here of what are we talking about when we're talking about navigating the grief that is as it's experienced in the holidays. And navigating is a great word for it. In order to give you some of the ideas of how we navigate through this, I have to give you some basics. And so we're going to start with some grief basics. Then I'll add in the holiday basics, and then that will set the stage for why am I suggesting certain ways of navigating this. So first of all, let's get into some grief basics. When people come to see me, and I've been doing this for quite a few years now, I learned that one of the big things that we need to understand about grief is that grief is anchored in love. Really, I mean, when that old saying, you grieve much because you love much, is absolutely true. If you did not love, you probably are not going to grieve, at least the way I'm going to talk about it today. Please keep in mind, there's all kinds of variations and differences, but the focus that I'm going to take for today is about the grief that is anchored in the love of the person that has died. And so we grieve because we love. That sets the stage for everything. It's interesting, it's one of those things that you go, well, of course, Greg, I grieve because I love, but we really don't take on all the nuances of that. It kind of gets lost. And I'll talk more about that as we go on, but you'll hear me kind of consistently say, and it's about love, and it's about love, and it's about love. The other thing that grief is anchored in is relationship. Our grief is directly tied to the relationship we have with the person that we love. I can love my aunt, I'll make up a name, Harriet. I really don't have an Aunt Harriet, but I can love her. But if she's lived in Washington, D.C., and I haven't really known her, I can love her. She's part of the family. I see her once in a while. She's a nice person. The grief I'm going to experience because of her death is going to be different than the grief that I have for my son that I saw every day. And he is a part of my legacy, or was a part of my legacy, and actually he still is. And so our relationship has a whole lot to do with grief. And so those two things really are what I'm going to say. We want to keep that lens in place, that we're talking about love, we're talking about significant relationship. And so with all of that, now that we've got that in place, then the idea is, well, but then what's the goal of grief work? I can tell you this. The goal of grief work is not necessarily to just fix it. For a lot of people, the idea of fixing it means, well, I guess I'll just accept it and just get over it and get back to normal and be done with it. And, never have it affect me the rest of my life. And I got to tell you, that doesn't mesh with love and relationship. Grief, good grief, and grief with the appropriate goal of integration. And what I mean by integration is that we take this loss, and it's a terrible thing, and it's hard and it hurts. We integrate that into our lives. We don't try to forget it. We don't try to act like it never happened, because it did. And because it did, we don't want to just try to be done with it, i.e. fix it that way, right? Because that's a formula for failure. It's just not going to work. As long as you have memories of that person, as long as you have things that remind you of that person, as long as your heart is still tugged toward that person, you will not forget them. You will not be done with them, but you can find a place to integrate that loss into your life, into a proper place in your life, where you can go on and do life well. But it's in the face of, and I still wish these people were here, because that's what love does. Love wants people to be around. You want to remember them. I don't know anybody who fell in love, and when they fell in love, said to the other person, "I love you, go away." No, we want people there, and we want to stay connected to them. So also, what's important in some of these basics here is the idea that you do get to keep loving them. You do keep to stay in relationship with them, but you have to transition that love and that relationship. You still love them, but you're going to love them from a sense of absence instead of presence. You're still going to be in relationship with them, but it's going to be in a relationship of absence as opposed to presence. But it's all about moving from the here and now with a person to the fact that they're not here and they're not. But I still want to stay connected to them. They were important to me. They were significant to me. So we always want to honor that. That's why you won't hear me talk about things like, well, let's just get back to normal. Let's just get over it. Let's be done with it. That kind of thing, because that's really not where love and relationship would take us in grief. And I think it's really more humane. Unfortunately, I got all those messages after Jeremy died. Well, let's just get back to normal and all that. And when you're in the middle of it, you go, that makes absolutely zero sense to me, because that's not what the heart does. The heart always remembers. The heart always honors. So we're going to honor that. So how do we do that? How do we do this transition journey? We'll call it the grief journey, in order to get to a place where we've integrated the loss into our lives. We do that. This is going to sound really counterintuitive. We do that by moving toward our grief, not away from our grief. We pay attention to it. We give it, we acknowledge it. We say it mattered. This person mattered. It's going to be hard for them to not be here. And so we move what's called, we kind of turn toward the grief, not away from it, which is really interesting, because that's what seems counterintuitive. We as a Western culture are so bombarded with what's called the medical model of man. Now, what do I mean by medical model, or actually model of man? That's a lens. That's just a way we see our humanity. And so the medical model of man, which is true, we are medical, right? The medical model of man says if something hurts, if something is painful, if I'm suffering with something, that's an indicator that something is wrong. And so if something's wrong medically, what do? We go see the doctor, we go to the ER, we go to the urgent care, which I did recently, and we get it fixed so that we can get back to normal as much as possible. It's always a movement back to something instead of forward. That medical model is so ingrained that even though we know everything I probably said, I'm hoping everybody can say, well, that makes sense, Greg. Yes, I love them. Of course, I don't want to forget them. Of course, I want to integrate the fact that they're not here into my life so that I can still love them and honor them. We forget. We forget about that part, and we get caught up in the medical model. And most of the messages in our society about grief and mourning are all about put it away, get back to something what was normal. But the problem is grief is not the medical model of man. It's the emotional model. Grief is an emotional thing. It's not a medical thing. So we can't necessarily apply the medical model of who we are to the grief experience, because that's emotional. So we do have to look at it differently. That's why we talk about integrating. That's why we talk about you still remember that person and honor that person and keep them with you in a way. I'll get to more on that later. So we have to embrace the emotional model of man. And in the emotional model of man, what are our emotions? Well, there's going to be all kinds of emotions, but let's just say in a general way of speaking, emotions are signals that are trying to tell us something. And Michaela mentioned that I went to seminary, and that's where I got my master's degree in counseling. Also, I have a master's degree in theology. And just about any seminary, there's a book called The Imitation of Christ. And it's by a guy named Thomas Kempis. 1500s was when he wrote this. And he has an expression in that book that I think is so powerful. He says there are appropriate times for sorrows of the soul. And I got to tell you, that time after my son died, I learned what a sorrow of the soul is. It is deep. It's not something that you go, yeah, okay, yeah, that's sad. All right, let's just kind of move on. Man, it sits with you for a while. And so quite often that takes us through the holidays. Jeremy died on September 1st. I remember those first holidays. And by holidays, I'm thinking more of it in a cultural sense. We can say Thanksgiving and Christmas, but there are many holidays, many different holidays that all seem to happen around this same time period. So depending on your culture, you may be dealing with a different holiday. And I remember, boy, those holidays, they were hard. They were so hard. So here we go. I told you, I warned you I was going to do this. But that hardness is because you love them. This is about love. And the holidays are going to show up, and you're going to still be loving them, not forgetting them, not putting them away, still be wanting them close. So that's why we talk about the integration and not a fix. So how does this then show up with holidays? I have to bring up one more thing then. We in our culture, have you noticed? I like blame our culture for all kinds of stuff. We in our culture, but I think I'm right. We in our culture, we take the word grief and mourning and we use it almost synonymously. We think it's the same thing. The problem is it's not. It is not the same thing. Think of it in this term, or in this way. Grief is what we are experiencing on the inside, which is a whole wealth of different emotions. They can go all over the place. Mourning, however, is when we give an outward expression to the grief that's within us. So when you hear me talking about mourning, I'm not talking about just about what you feel. I'm talking about then what do you do with what you feel? You know, a classic example of that, it doesn't have to apply to all people. For many people in grief, mourning would be tears, shed some tears. That's an outward expression of what's going on the inside. I bring that one up because that was one of the big things that I learned. I wasn't much of a crier, but I got to tell you, I cried a lot for quite a while. So I went to the emotional model of man, if you will, touching back on that. I let my emotions really be acknowledged, and then give them an outward expression. Why am I bringing that up so much? This is another thing a lot of people don't understand about basic grief work. If grief and mourning are two different things, what studies have shown is that it's the mourning that helps the grief move through the transition to get to the integration. So mourning is incredibly more important than I think what we give credence to, especially within holidays. Why? And so why? Well, here's the deal. So if we're talking about emotions, in classics, ones being sadness, tears, things like that, and a need to express them, let's talk about Western culture holidays. Here was my first experience with holidays. I was in school and I learned there's a holiday break. We get holiday, and holidays were, oh man, that was happy time. That was, yay, I don't have to go to school. I get to play. So holiday became play. And then I grew up and, you wind up in the working environment, and then you're at work and you look at the calendar and, oh, it's a holiday next Monday. We go, yippee dippy, yay, I get to play. I don't have to show up. I get to go play. Our culture kind of like connects holidays with joyful celebration. That's what a holiday is. It's a joyful celebration. A lot of times these will be with family. And I got to tell you, it can be family by blood, or I really do believe that friends are the family we choose for ourselves, or with friends. I had a friend, Mark, who died 2 years ago. His death was so significant to me because we were like, oh gosh, we were friends from the time we were 15. Close friends, shared a lot. He was closer to me. So I called him a brother of a different mother. That's how close we were. Right. And so a lot of times these celebrations that are supposed to be all happy are with family, or maybe with friends, hopefully as well. And so we wind up with a mismatch. I come into the holiday carrying an emotional sadness, but I walk into things that are all about happy, happy, happy. Let's all be happy. This is fun. This is good. Life is good. Life is great. That's a mismatch. That's an internal, gosh, I could call it the rub. But the mismatch, it's almost like a conflict, almost like a collision, because it's the square peg in the round hole, if you will. So we wind up then with this intense need to mourn, but we wind up in John Wayne's celebration. Why do I say that? John Wayne. I love John Wayne movies. I hope you do too. Those are great, fun movies. They're definitely a comment of an era in the history of our culture. But what did John Wayne tell us? What did we all learn from John Wayne, from most of his movies anyway? Well, this is terrible. Well, pull up your bootstraps. We got to move on. We got other things to attend to, right? That the whole message of John Wayne, unfortunately, as much as I like him, but I got to be honest, the whole message was avoidance. We need to avoid this. This gets in the way. This is not the place for it. We got other things to do. That's the message that shows up when we try to enter into the holidays, when we're carrying grief. We get this idea that, well, the holiday it's all about joy, so I guess I don't belong. I guess it's not made for me. I got to tell you this. Look up holiday in Merriam-Webster's dictionary. Hopefully, most of you are old enough to remember there was these things called dictionaries. It's online. You can still get to it. There are multiple definitions of holiday. One of them talks about it's a time when we honor with solemn ceremony. It's a time when maybe we do things out of the ordinary or differently. So there's multiple definitions, but we seem to have just taken one of the definitions, festive celebration, and made that the only definition. So really, actually, you do fit. You do fit. It's just that our culture is not used to it, and it's becomes a very it becomes a conflict. I'm going to go ahead and share this one. Yeah, the one couple I worked with. This was so terrible. Their daughter was born. They brought her into the world, and unfortunately, she died just less than an hour after birth. Terrible. They loved her. They named her when she was still in the womb. They loved her. They were already connected to her. She was already significant in their life. And tragic, terrible. So they had to carry this grief, the death of their daughter, and the husband's, the father's father, took him aside and said, "Now, just so you understand, we do not do death. Shut him down. We do not do death. So don't come to any family events with talking about this or anything." I mean, that was terrible. Why? Because that was the antithesis. That was the opposite reaction of, no, I have this person that meant something to me. I want to honor them. I want to love them. Even share them, maybe. Right? So unfortunately, that's an extreme. I understand it. But that's an example of some of the stuff people run into with holidays. Maybe yours would not be as severe as that, but it's kind of like, well, this is happy, don't bring it down. If they're not saying it, we're feeling it, because holidays are supposed to be festive celebrations. We're all glad, and that's all that it's about. So the real rub here then, why are we talking about I have to have a way to navigate the holidays, is because we've got conflicting messages. No, I want to be able to. I want to be able to say his name. I want to be able to even shed a tear if I need to. That kind of fits one of the definitions of holiday, right? A solemn occasion. Yeah, but it just doesn't match well with most people. If you are allowed to do that, thank God. Because I just hear story after story after story, and even in my own, of how the holidays just seem to exacerbate this conflict we have between us and what our culture, whether that be the whole American United States culture or just a family culture, doesn't allow for. So we have to then find a way to navigate, and we have to navigate with planning, and we have to take a look at both the emotional and the practical ways that we can navigate this kind of conflicting pressure and still be true to ourselves. So I'm going to bring up these things on an emotional and practical level, but underneath the idea of emotional, I'm going to talk about both what happens more personally and what's going to happen more socially, right? Because both of those things are at work in the holidays. It's what does it mean to me? What is it to be with my group, my family, that kind of thing. The first thing to do is on the personal side, emotionally, personally. One of the great things to do is to, and I get into this a lot with clients. Well, I don't even like to call them clients. There's with people that I care for that come to see me. It's called a both and mentality. We also have a great tendency, and I don't know if it's as much cultural as it's somehow a weird part of our humanity. We like to be in the either or. Either this holiday I have to go be all happy, or this holiday is just going to be sad, and so I might as well give it up. That's either or, black and white, that kind of thing. We spend a lot of time with all that. I have found it was actually in grief work that I found there's this middle thing. It doesn't have to be all this or all that. There's this middle thing. I didn't know what to call it, so I call it the both and. I don't know. I didn't know what to do. So when I'm talking about the both and, I'm talking about, well, it's not this or this. It's actually both of these things. One of the things we can do for ourselves is give ourselves permission to say, I can both be thankful and sad at the same time, at the same moment. It's a both and thing. The first Thanksgiving was so weird. I was thankful that I knew my son was in a better place. But I was sad because I wanted him here so that we could have some turkey together and laugh and be a family of presence. So I had to do this both and thing is okay. Because see, that's what happens, when we go to the holiday festivals and celebrations and all that. We can walk in with, it's almost presented with an either or thing, really it can be both and. And so that starts with you personally, you giving yourself permission to be both and. Because I find we've been so trained with holidays and stuff that we almost shame ourselves. Well, I should be all thankful. This is Thanksgiving. I should just be thankful. And that's it. End of story. No, it's okay to have the full story. I can be thankful for that. And also wish he was here. I loved him. Here we go again, right? It's about love. He was my son. It's about relationship. So I have to honor those. So both and is a whole different way of thinking. And it gives us room then to both be thankful and sad at the same time. Things that you would think would be contradictory. You can't have one and the other. Oh, yes, you can. Oh, yes, you can. Another thing that I'm going to encourage you to look at is the idea of being, I use the term congruent. I think the pop culture word for this would be authentic. Be authentic. Be who you are, put it all out there. I talk about congruent. Congruent is that idea of, okay, I'm grieving on the inside, so I probably need to do some mourning on the outside to some degree. All right. And so it's really important for us to be congruent, because when we are congruent, that actually it helps us, rather than fighting the fact of, well, I've just got to be happy. So no tear's going to come out of this eye today. No, if a tear does come out, I'm like, yeah, that feels good. That felt right. Right. And so it helps us to be congruent or authentic. You might say it's okay. Give yourself permission to, if you feel it, go ahead and acknowledge it and feel it. It's all right to have that, even on I'm picking on Thanksgiving. This happens in all the holidays, right? So the idea is if you feel it, you have an opportunity to heal it. It's almost that grief mourn thing. You can grieve it, feel it, but part of the healing of it is give it outward expression. This is real. And this is here for a right reason. It's okay for me to be sad that somebody that I love is not with us during this holiday. I learned from my daughter. When you're doing a lot of personal work around a grief, if you're home alone, that's one thing, but I think a lot of us don't necessarily get to be just by ourselves a lot. She introduced me to using the shower. The shower is a great place where you can do some of this work and give yourself lots of permissions and do some mourning on that day as well. I'm not saying you have to do it for the whole day even, but you need to do it some, because you need that ability to mourn, because that's what really sends the statement. This is about love and this is about relationship. So that's one thing. Give yourself some internal permissions to be at a certain place that maybe you're used to. Oh no, you're not supposed to do that. You've had all those messages. No, we can actually think outside the box and be different. We can take a both and approach. Another thing that I did for me personally, I did not grow up in a culture that lit candles. However, I found myself in Sedona one time, and they have a beautiful church there, and they had and I had this real urge to light a candle, and I did, and it did something to my soul. It did something to my heart that I did that in honor of him. I do have three rules in grief that are helpful. I believe that you have to apply personally to yourself. The first one is you are in this major transition, right? And at any other kind of transition, we might know we need to be kind to ourselves. We sometimes forget that in grief. You are in a major transition. So this is a time when you have to be really kind to yourself. Because why? Because you're having, if we talk about the emotional model of man, we're talking about you have a broken heart right now. And you have a broken heart. Why? Here we go again. Because you loved. And you still do. You don't have to stop loving. So your heart takes the hit. And so you have to be really kind to yourself. That's rule one. Rule two, pay attention to rule one. And the reason rule two points back to rule one, because we are terrible at being kind to ourselves. So I give it double whammy. Be really, really kind to yourself. The third rule is just simply breathe. Just breathe. Catch your breath, right? You are at this moment in the midst of a holiday, you are a work in process. It is not normal. What was one of those definitions of holiday? To do something other than the ordinary or the normal? Yeah, it is not normal. You might need to do some special things and think some different ways. So be kind to yourself, really be kind to yourself, and breathe. That's all. That's all you really got to do. So that's more on the personal, emotional side. On the social side, if you're with a family that does allow mourning, be thankful. Thank them. Because I hear it over and over and over, that it wasn't like that for a lot of people. If you do have that, I would say 1 in 50 or 60 situations I've worked in, mourning was allowed and other people joined in. That's a gift you've been given, right? Thank them. Some of the things you can do, though, if you're not in that kind of environment, find a safe person. Just because you're blood with somebody doesn't mean they're all safe. I hate to say that. That sounds terrible, but it is true. There are people that are going to be safer for you than other people. Find a safe person, and if you need to take a moment to make a comment, or maybe just let a tear show up to another human being. Feel free to do that. It takes a little bit of bravery. I know that, but that's a way where you can, in a social context, still exhibit love and relationship, and that this person meant something. Like I said at Thanksgiving, I was like, Jeremy would have liked this. We had we DeNeals, we make banana salad, believe it or not. I won't get into all the details of it, but it's like salad made out of bananas. Oh yeah, he would have loved this. Banana salad? Wow. Chocolate pie? Wow, he would have loved this. And it's hard because he's not here. Right? I could say that to a person. And they got it. Find a safe person. And then also, on a practical side, you really, gosh, this is so hard too. You wind up learning how to be a gracious griever. People are going to say things that probably are not the most helpful for them to say. Things like, well, I'm so glad he's in a better place. Well, yeah, thanks. I got to a point where I learned how to just say thank you and say, okay, I'm going to be a gracious griever. They know not what they do, because the whole story is, yes, he's in a better place, but I am not. Would rather him be here right now. And so I carry that. So they're going to say way more than that. Can't we be done with this? Are you over it yet? All kinds of stuff. And you just you just kind of nod and just be a gracious griever. Again, borrowing on a quote from the Bible, they know not what they do. So let's jump to the practical here. How are we doing? All right. On the practical side of things, again, personally, just be aware that when you go and you are going to go to something social, it's going to be awkward. It's just going to be awkward. It's going to be awkward, number one, because it's not normal. The holiday, I was used to Jeremy being there at the holiday, wherever, from the time we woke up till we went somewhere till we came home. The holiday had Jeremy in it. My friend Mark, I could count on him every holiday to send me a text first thing in the morning. I'm almost going to tear up on that one right now. Yeah, things are going to seem awkward. They aren't what you're used to. So be aware of that. Be aware of this shows up a lot. We grew up kind of with this adage, out of sight, out of mind. Well, that's great with a whole lot of things. And I really use that when I have dry cleaning, when I have clothes that need to go to the dry cleaners, I put that bag by the front door, because in sight is in mind. But if I don't put that bag there, it's out of sight. I'm probably going to forget to take the dry cleaning. It's because out of sight, out of mind. That is not the way grief is going to work on the holidays or any other time, really. Out of sight is going to be screaming probably at you. He was supposed to be here. So just be aware that these things are going to show up. These don't mean anything's wrong with you. These are the normal things. These are the things of love and relationship. These awkward things are going to show up because things are not normal right now. Be aware that your energy is going to be low. Grief work, the journey of transitioning from one life to a life that does not have that person as a present part of it, requires a lot of internal energy. And so you're going to have less energy. So act, be appropriate with that. Maybe you don't have to be the person that cooks 80% of the meal. Attend to yourself with that. And just know that it's okay not to have the energy you would normally have. I did not even have the energy to show up on Easter. My friend Mark died the day before. I held his hand and watched him die and said goodbye to him in the here and now. And the next day was Easter, and I had to call my brother. It's always at my brother's house. And I had to say, I'm not going to be there today. My best friend just died. My brother of a different mother. It's not in me to be there. So you can actually skip something if you want to. If that's what you need to do to care for yourself, you're not setting a precedent. You're not saying, so I'm never going to another Easter. You're just saying for right now, that could be too much. I don't have the energy to be there and maybe put on a smile. It's just too much. Another thing you can do is start a new tradition. I subsequently have showed up with my brother for many, many, many holidays. In my new tradition is I go by my son's grave. And I stop by his grave and I talk to him for a minute. Merry Christmas, Jeremy. So I take a moment with him. And I do that now every holiday before I go to my brother's. It's a new tradition that I've brought into my holiday, because it is ultimately, it's my holiday. I guess because I have a master's in theology, my family, the bigger family, that's at the bigger celebrations of my brother's house, they all decided that, well, then Greg's the one that gets to say the prayer before we start anything, right? I don't know. So what? I've got a degree. But that's what I do. I found that, one of the things I incorporated in my prayers is being thankful for the people that are there and thankful for the people that have been here. I just put it right out there and acknowledge the fact that there's people that we would all like here that are not here. That's part of the prayer. That's a new tradition I've brought even into my prayer life. One of my clients, what she did was her loved one, the ashes were in an urn, and she kept it in a more private place. But on holidays, she started bringing it out and putting it on the fireplace mantle. So when the whole family was around, there he is. There he is. That brought comfort to her, to be able to do that. Another tradition I do is every year I also give to a nonprofit organization that I admire in the city of St. Louis here, and I give that money in memory of Jeremy. And every year I get a letter back, thank you, and Jeremy is remembered. So there's all kinds of things you can do then on that personal, practical side, on the practical side, with the emotions. Socially, there is two kinds of families. If you're doing holidays with families, there's two kinds of families: closed family systems and open family systems. The quick definition of the two: a closed family system, you're not allowed to do anything out of order. You're not allowed to bring anything up other than what has been a part of the tradition of the particular holiday. We don't want to hear from you. You already got the extreme example of that. A dad telling his son, we don't do death. All right. Right after his daughters died. Yeah, he set the stage for how that works. So how did he practically do that? Well, he needed to still show up. He would show up, but he would minimize. He didn't need to stay there for the 6 hours he normally would have stayed, because this was going to be a really hard place for him to be. Yet he still felt that press. I need to show up some. So he made sure he had an exit strategy. And this is a very common thing. Always make sure you have an exit strategy. Maybe you don't know exactly how this is going to be for you. And you might only want to stay for an hour instead of 4 or 5. Well, then be sure you drove, or you're with somebody that you can give a high sign to, and you get to say, I'm just not quite I'm not, whatever you want to say, and then exit. It's okay. Again, you're not setting a precedent that this is the way it's going to be for every holiday after that. It's just what you need to do right now to be kind to yourself. I meant it. I meant it when I said be kind to yourself. But for a lot of people, they can stay. So what do? I found one of the important things is use the person's name. I love saying Jeremy's name. Again, that is so, it feels good to me. He's not forgotten. He was supposed to, those first holidays, I used his name. And I learned this. There are many other people at those holidays. They're just not sure what to do. What do we do with Greg? His son just died. And here he is. So I asked a bunch of people one time, I said, why do you guys not use Jeremy's name around me? And they all said, well, because we knew it's a difficult thing. And so we thought we were being kind by not bringing it up because that would make you feel sad. And I can't tell you, I had to be honest with these people and just say, well, I knew I could. I trusted them. They were safe people. And I just said, well, just so you know, for future reference, you can't make me feel worse than what I do every moment of the day right now. So I'd much rather hear his name. So I found if I go places and I bring up his name, that gives everybody else the cue. Oh, that's okay. That's okay to do. Right? Some people will even go to the point, and I did this one time too, of saying, hey, I would love to hear everybody's stories about Jeremy. And people gave me stories, things I didn't even know, things that actually had laughed at. So here we are doing all this, and there was laughter because some of them were really, really funny. Right? So you can do that socially. You're letting people know this is all okay. This is okay. Alan Wolfelt, the guy that I was certified through for death and grief studies, he brings up some additional things. I'll just throw them by you. Be prepared to answer the tough questions. If you go somewhere and it's a holiday, people are going to say, how you doing? All right. Right. Well, think about some of those questions ahead of time and be prepared. What can you do that's honest, but also doesn't go too far, depending on what your family allows and doesn't allow. You can say things like, well, it's really tough right now, but I know it's going to be, I know I'm going to be better. You can say things like that. You don't have to say, oh, I'm fine. Right? How are you? And then they're going to say, well, I'm fine. So you lie, they lie, we all lie, and then we live in a lie for the next couple of hours. Why don't we just be honest to a degree? And there's going to be more questions than that. I had to get used to the question, well, how many kids do you have when you meet somebody? All right. What do I tell them? Do I have 2 or do I have 1? I have a surviving daughter. And so I have kind of like my stock standard reply now that I use. So just kind of do a little planning for that. Also drink. Oh, wait a minute. It's more than just drink. Drink lots of water. Okay. A lot of these celebrations, depending on your culture, can have a lot of liquor flowing and stuff. Be really careful. Be really careful. At its core, alcohol is a depressive substance. It may loosen you up a little bit, but in its core, it's depressive. So drink lots of water, or tea, or lemonade, or soda. Probably avoid what might be your norm in alcohol, because you're already at kind of a crucial time showing up with grief at a holiday. So be very, very careful and take care of yourself that way. And then one of the last things, I'll bring this up, there's so many others, but one of the last things that I want to bring up is there's a thing called linking objects. My son, for the last 2 or 3 years of his life, he had do you know what chainmail is? It's like this continuous loop. They used to make, in the medieval times, they made armor out of them. It's this chainmail thing. He had a chainmail necklace. I have that. And when I want to take Jeremy with me to something like this, I put on that necklace. My wife knows. When I put on that necklace, it's because I'm taking Jeremy with me. He's still a part of my heart. I take him with me. So like I said, there are many other ways of navigation through all this, but definitely some of it's about you personally, and then some of it is about, so what do you want to do socially? And so you're going to grieve, and then you find ways that you can mourn that are appropriate for you and for your culture, but you might have to do things a little differently. Obviously, my hope and prayer is this time today, has given you a deeper understanding, number one, of grief, but also has been a help on how you navigate, because these holidays can be hard and they can be tough because they're not like they were before. And you're in a transition. You're trying to figure things out. So be really kind to yourself while you navigate. And so thank you so much for letting me talk for a while. And so we do have a couple of resources that we want to present to you that you can take advantage of. And one of them, you've heard me say the name Dr. Alan Wolfelt. He has a book called Healing Your Holiday Grief. It looks like that. And the way it works is it's 100 practical ideas. And it's one page. Remember I talked about energy? This one doesn't take a lot of energy, right? It's one page, very quick, on different ways that you can, these are practical ideas for blending mourning and celebration during the holiday season. Wow, it's a good book. There's a couple of others that he wrote. One of them just came out, so it's not on the resource list. This is called Cherishing. I'm hoping you can see that. Cherishing. It's called The Art of Fully Living While Still Loving and Honoring Those Who Died. Wow, sounds pretty apropos, doesn't it? It's a really small, very thin book. It's only like 50, 60 pages. Again, doesn't take a lot of energy. Some of the other ones by Zonnebelt, Smeej, and De Vries, this is a classic. It's called The Empty Chair. It's a whole book about what they kind of stumbled into was one of the ways you can honor your love for the person and your relationship is have an empty chair at the table. An empty chair. It says this is reserved for somebody who should be here who's not. So that's handling grief on holidays and special occasions. They have other things in there besides that. Harold Ivan Smith. Oh my gosh. This was such a great book for me. A Decembered Grief. Very, very focused around Christmas. Kind of the same idea as Alan's book with the 100 Practical Ideas. He introduces one subject at a time, just one page, has something to say about it. He does come from a Christian perspective and introduces also a scripture. And it was living with loss while others are celebrating. Well, that certainly sounds like what we're talking about trying to introduce. How do I live with loss while we're celebrating? So again, thank you. And I think if there's some questions or comments, Michaela, if you've been getting some of those things, we can address those if everybody's ready.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Greg, please feel to chat those in. I had a question, Greg. So, for most of us, as you were sharing, if we do have a closed family system, maybe we are single or widowed, and maybe we don't have, a close support system throughout this time. What are some ways in which someone can find support if their family or maybe even some of their friends are surprising them in the ways that they're responding, maybe in more hurtful, probably unintentional ways. But how would you speak to someone that's navigating that?
I think first thing I would bring up just on that part of it about, you don't have a lot of close support kind of thing. Actually, after Jeremy died, I read so many books and watched so many podcasts and stuff of people who've had a similar loss of me, and it helped me so much because most of the books that I read were really in line with what I have come to believe. That we never really want to lose them, right? We want to love. Needs to continue. We need to find ways to continue to love them. And so I found a comradeship, if you will, with a whole bunch of different authors. Now, I'm a book guy, and this was also 1998. There are so many good podcasts out there. And if you're listening to something or reading something and it doesn't attune to you well, so what? Get rid of it. Find those voices. Find those people that are like, well, what would be the modern way of saying that? Your tribe. All right, go find your tribe. There are people out there. There are, online support groups now. And there you can connect with bereaved parents of the United States, as an example. If it's a child, there are spousal loss support groups. You have to be a little careful with support groups, because there's all kinds of different people in there. But it can give you a community in which you have a common shared loss. That's really, really important. Another way is, is you find a good therapist. You find somebody you can go talk to, and you can say what, the part of being a counselor. I actually consider myself a companion. I use that terminology, but we're known in the culture as therapists or counselors. Find a good companion. Somebody that allows you all that room to do what you need to do. More often than not, to be honest, Michaela's a sad commentary in that fact. More often than not, meeting with me is where people do have their safe place.
Yeah.
They don't have it other places, kind of thing. Yeah. So to me, yeah. I would think, and the rub on that is you only have so much energy, right? So it's going to be slow. Don't expect, oh my gosh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to read 100 books and watch 19 podcasts and join 19 groups. You'll wear yourself out about that fast. Mm-hmm. Take it slow. Take it easy. Okay. Does that kind of give you something?
Yeah, I think there? Just the idea of just, you not having to navigate this alone.
Yeah.
And if it's hard to find those people potentially, that, you can seek those out for yourself.
Right. Right. You can actually go to Alan's Wolf. Alan's has a website. The guy's written like 90 odd books, right? You're going to find a book in there that's going to be helpful as well and speak to you. But he also has a place on his website. It's called Find a Therapist. These are all people that have been trained by him in this idea of this modality I use called companioning, which I think is so humane because it's about the heart, right? And that's what he focuses in on. And so you can find a therapist that has been trained in his companioning modality. And that he's just one of many. There's lots of places you can go, that say find a group, that kind of thing. If nothing else, it's okay. Be kind to yourself. Try something out. If it doesn't fit, quit. Go find your tribe.
Looks like we had another question. Just in the differences, male and females, and how they grieve. And should, if someone potentially knows of a griever, should we be aware of those through the holidays? Are there particular ways in which those that know someone that is grieving, that we can be there for them?
Sure. That's beautiful. I mean, wherever that question came from, that's saying, hey, I want to change the way our culture works. Thank you. Yes, change the culture. You can, if you know somebody's grieving, you can let them know, hey, if you just need somebody that will hear what you have to say, today or in a moment, I'm open. And then it really is about you doing that. It's not about you trying to fix it. Don't try to fix it. Just say, yeah, just validate them. Yeah, today's hard. Yeah, today doesn't seem right, does it? And just be a kind heart that's there. We used to have this in our culture, to be honest with you. People used to wear black armbands, right? We had mourning clothes, that was called, that let everybody else know, be tender with me because I am mourning. So I'm very vulnerable. And so that doesn't happen anymore. We don't have that. And so it's being a person that's conscious of, oh my gosh, this person probably should have a black armband on. I think I will just go be kind to them. I think that goes miles. I have some friends that are friends for me now because of when Jeremy died. A couple of people stepped up and were that way to me. Oh yeah, we are friends to this day, and I'd do anything for them because they were kind to me at a difficult moment in my life.
Then we'll do one more question. So for children, maybe that's an adult child, maybe you have young children. Just how do you respond if maybe your parent is grieving in a way that is different than you? How do you still have that connection around that grief if your grief potentially, and how you're coping is potentially different than one another? Potentially maybe avoidance where you're wanting to address it, and it could be vice versa. But how would you navigate that?
Okay, so let me make sure I'm clear on the question. So you're like in a situation where you've had the same loss, but you are thinking differently than the other person.
Yes.
Maybe the spouse. Well, I think the first thing to do then is you have to realize there's a difference. It's the same person that you're grieving, but you've had two different kinds of losses, and you've loves, and you've had two different kinds of relationship, even among siblings. I see this all the time. It can be this is a very touchy thing for families, because we have this idea that, oh, it's so dad and husband has died. It's the same thing. We're all going to be closer, and we're all going to attune to this the same way. Nope. I mean, I hate to be so blunt, but if it's love-based and relationship-based, first thing for your own self is to understand that person might have to do something differently because they had a different relationship. A husband-wife relationship is not the same as a father or mother or parent-child. And even within children. Matter of fact, I'm just met with a guy the other day who he was the youngest of all the siblings, and there was like 9 years difference between him and the next closest one. He was almost like an only child, if you will, in birth order. So his relationship was totally different than some of the others. And I don't know about everybody else out there, but I know the older I got, the kinder parent I became softer. And so sometimes the younger ones have a whole different experience of mom and dad. They get together with siblings and talk about family stuff, and they go, that's not the person I know. So I think internally, the first thing to do is just recognize this is about love and relationship. So that might change everything. If you used a word I do want to key on a little bit. If there is true avoidance going on, okay, avoidance is the one thing. I have a lot. Let me step back for a second. I have a lot of people do a lot of stuff because that's what they need to do based on their love and on their relationship. But when I see avoidance, that is about the only way people really actually wind up stuck. They get stuck when they're avoiding. So you can have a conversation about avoidance. You might find out they're not really avoiding. I've thought people were avoiding, and I found out, oh yeah, this is the person that goes and gets in the shower and cries for an hour. I just didn't know, right? So out of love and care for somebody else, you can just say, hey, are you okay? I've kind of noticed this. Is it hard for you? Is it difficult for you to hear me bring up Jeremy's name or something like that? You can have a confrontation, but let it be gentle. And I would say only limit it to if you think avoidance is going on and you love that person so much, you don't want to see them get stuck. But it is a slow thing. There is almost always some small measure of avoidance as you're trying to work through it. That's why grief can take a year or more easily. When we're talking about intense grief. So don't overanalyze, but it could take a little while. And a little bit of avoidance, I don't want to use the word avoidance, a little bit of distraction. Sometimes you need that distraction just to catch your breath. Right? I'm going to watch a show and I'm going to laugh at it. Right? I needed that. Right? Grief 24/7 can be too much. Okay, I probably muddied that. The whole water's on that.
That's great. That's great. Well, I think that's it for our webinar today. So I just want to thank everyone who attended. We will have this sent out as a recording, and we'll make a note of the different resources that Greg had listed as well. So thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.